All right. Well, hello and welcome to Fireside Chat covering IDC's white paper, Bare Metal as a Service will play a critical role in cloud computing's future for customers. Okay, that was a big title because it's a big topic and we have a lot to cover here today. And today's exciting webinar is sponsored by Pure Storage and IDC and produced by Actual Tech Media. Now, my name is Jess Steinbach. I'm with Actual Tech Media, and I am really genuinely happy and excited to be your moderator for this conversation today because there is nothing that I love more than a good fireside chat. So what does that actually mean? What is a fireside chat? Well, today we're going to step away from the slides. Now, don't worry, we do have a few good ones for you, some cool graphics coming your way, but we're leaving behind that usual presentation style. Instead, we're going to invite all of you to pull up a chair around this lovely virtual fireplace that we have, put your feet up, get cozy, get comfortable, and join in an engaging and interactive conversation with our two incredible expert speakers. This is going to be a great day, and I really want to get our presenters out here and dive into the content, but let me just get through a few quick housekeeping points, and then we will get the show on the road very quickly, I promise. Okay, so I already introduced myself, but I'm going to take a step to look at the audience console in front of you here. There we go, the words. All right, so starting with your audience console, if you can find that handouts and questions section in the console, click on that questions tab. Now, this is going to be the best place to get involved, to get interactive, and post all of those insightful questions, those comments, the feedback, the ideas that you have. We're going to be asking you a lot of questions today, and we really want to hear from all of you out there. So let's give it a little bit of a test run right now. If you haven't already done that, I saw a lot of you saying hi and hello this morning, but let's start out, give it a little bit of a test run, say hello, say hi, tell us how you're doing, tell us how your day's going. It's Wednesday, I know, so it's, it's that midday feel, but bring a little positivity with us and we'll start that out on a good note. Now, speaking of Wednesdays, and Wednesday feels, I know that every once in a while those tech gremlins get a hold of the system here. So if there are any problems with the system today, the slides aren't showing up for you, audio, something like that, don't worry about that. Try a quick browser refresh. That will usually solve any of those smaller issues. But if that's not working for you, just shoot a message in that questions tab to the Actual Tech Media team, and we will be there to help you out throughout the day today, whatever you need. All right, now the last thing I want to point out on this guided tour that we're taking together of your audience console is the handouts tab. Please do spend some time exploring that handouts tab. There are some really cool resources that you're going to want to take away to follow up on the conversation that we're having today. So make sure you check that out. All right, now, as always, it is not just awesome content that we are giving away today. We also have a $250 Amazon gift card as a prize drawing, and we will get to that at the end of our webinar. Now, of course, you must be here in live attendance during the webinar today, and all winners must meet the Actual Tech Media prize terms and conditions. If you are not sure what those terms and conditions are, that's not a problem. I don't have them memorized either. You can click on over to that handouts tab, scroll down to the bottom, and you will find the full T's and C's waiting for you there. All right, the last thing I want to tell you before we get into our content, I promise it's coming. I want to talk to you about the Best Question gift card because, as I said, we want the conversation today to be fun and interactive. And so the first and most important incentive to ask questions is it helps bring that energy. It helps bring that engagement. It allows our speakers to get you the information that you want. But if that wasn't enough for you, we have a little extra incentive for you asking questions today. So today we will be offering a $50 Amazon gift card to the best question asked. Now we're going to review all the questions asked after we wrap. So even if your question does not get asked live, there is still a chance to win. So get those questions in. All right, well, I said we would get into our session as quickly as we could, and I meant it. Here we are. That's all our housekeeping out of the way, and now we can get into our fireside chat. So in just a moment, I'm going to bring out our expert presenters here with me, and I am so excited to introduce you all to Dave McCarthy, Vice President, IDC Worldwide Infrastructure Practice, and Jack Hogan, Vice President of Technology Strategy and Cloud Alliances at Pure Storage. Cool titles, cool humans. Let's get our incredible experts on out here with us. Hi, Dave. Hi, Jack.
Hey, Jess. Great to be here today.
Yeah, same here. I mean, you certainly set the tone for a high energy conversation, so we'll do our best to keep it going.
Amazing. I have faith. I know this team is going to be a great time today. And, I really want to start by giving each of you a chance to introduce yourselves more than just the titles, and tell us a little bit about, what you do in your day-to-day. And then also, what are we excited to talk about today? What can the audience expect to get out of their time with us here and in this conversation? So Dave, maybe you can kick us off, and then Jack, you can hop in.
Yeah, certainly. I'd be happy to. So, hey, everyone. Great to be with you here today, talking to you from just outside of Seattle, Washington. So my general role is to act as an industry analyst. And what that means is I'm looking at not just the trends that we're seeing in terms of how different technology topics come to bear, but how customers are navigating their way through those topics, and how different vendors are answering those needs with unique products. So it's actually a really interesting sort of position to be in. And so, sometimes we do this in a couple of different ways. We do it through market sizing. We do it through, surveys where we really understand buyer intent. And so my general area within IDC has been cloud infrastructure. And I look at it from all the different permutations, whether that be sort of public cloud, private cloud, even the edge location kind of things, and really looking about how companies now have really sort of evolved the way they think about cloud technology. And so I'll cut it short there. I mean, you're certainly going to hear a little bit about how cloud has changed over the last few years, and why all of a sudden bare metal is becoming a very interesting option for a lot of customers. So I'll end it there and then turn it over to Jack.
Yeah, thanks, Dave. Yeah, so as my role at Pure is kind of defined as a cloud tech strategy and cloud alliances. It really comes from a position of having been on the customer side. I was a 20-year customer side CTO for a high growth consumer cloud and SaaS company, and I experienced a lot of the challenges and pain points of the customers I interact with on a regular basis. During that 20 years, I was a 5-year Pure customer and recognized the revolutionary technology that Pure was bringing into the data center by completely revolutionizing the all-flash storage experience. But as we're now extending that technology into this hybrid and native cloud capabilities, I'm excited to be able to really provide insight, empathy to what our customers are feeling, understanding the challenges and pain points, and realizing that this cloud journey, and as companies look at how they need to deploy in different states across the cloud, it's not easy. And so I'm here to really help within Pure, help guide our customers, help guide our partners, and help provide the solutions that can really answer the business challenges, really the outcomes that CIOs and VPs of IT and even the CFOs and CEOs are having to use technology and expand on solving key problems. Like, what do you do between your on-premises data center and that native public cloud environment? There's that element in the middle, and we'll get into that as we go through this session today.
I love that. I'm so excited. And, Dave, you hit on evolution, which I think is going to be really exciting to get into and see kind of where things are going. And I think that approach with empathy really stood out for me, Jack, in what you were saying, and understanding where folks in the audience might be coming from and what their experience might be like, and then really helping them find the solutions at where they're, where they're struggling, where they need it. So I think this is going to be clearly a very informative and interesting day. And as we jump into it, one of the coolest things that I like when we were talking about the structure of this conversation was, Jack, you and Dave really wanted to start with the audience and understanding where they are. And so again, coming back to that empathy point. So we are going to start out our day by asking a few questions. And I'm just going to put a poll up on the screen here for you all. And we're going to ask you a few of these questions. And what I want to let you all know is, so when you're answering these questions, if you've done polls with us before, you know that the results are not going to display right away. But what we're going to do is kind of move forward in the conversation, collect a little bit of information, and then we're going to come back to your results. So Jack and Dave will walk you through what we're seeing from all of you, what your answers were, and how that might reflect sort of larger trends. And then again, getting into maybe some solutions and things that are really directed to what your needs are. So starting out with, do you have plans to move out of your on-prem or colo data centers? And this is a pretty easy one. Yes, no. Jack, Dave, any context you want to add to this one, or pretty good?
Well, I think it's interesting in the fact of, when you look at how people are deploying, there's almost have to qualify it of, do you plan to completely move out of your data center sometimes, or do you not, right? And what I really see is, customers taking kind of like a workload specific view of what things they feel like they want to retain in data center facilities and what things they feel like they're comfortable or might actually find some really good advantages to moving into cloud.
Yeah, and what I'd add to that is I think that companies are really deploying their cloud workloads in different states, and we'll get into that a little bit. But I think that as Dave said, it's not an all-in thing. I think a lot of CIOs I talk to, they get to that 50, 60, 70% state of moving out of their own data centers or co-location environment and moving to a cloud-based environment. And so, I think as we're seeing some of the polling answers come through, it's not surprising. It's looking relatively split, but we'll go through the answers later. But I think that's by nature of kind of there's different states, and in many cases spanning those different states across how infrastructure is really deployed out. And I think it's important to note that we're talking about the infrastructure layer, all the way up into that application layer. So it is important how the audience answers to that.
Okay, well, we're moving along. So do you have plans to move workloads to the public cloud and hyperscalers, I think is what we're what we're looking at there. And a yes, no. Dave, Jack, anything that you want to add here or kind of the same thoughts?
Well, I think what we're going to find out in the course of today's conversation is just really around the new variation of options that people have. And I know that's going to be one of the topics we're going to talk about is, how do people think about cloud today versus how they used to think about cloud. And so, yeah, I mean, I feel like it's in many cases very much an and conversation than an or conversation when they think about what they're building.
Yeah.
And I'd add to that. I think not only is it an and conversation, it's spanning multiple ands. So hybrid and multi-cloud. I think we're seeing that. So it's not just moving out of one hyperscaler to another, moving from one hyperscaler to on-premises. It's really that kind of circular environment to really place the data workloads where they need to be processed, where the most logical place for them to be accessed by their end customers, or where the workload processing needs to be done. And so that kind of hybrid multi-cloud is really kind of indicative of what we're seeing here. We're also seeing trends, from conversations that I have around making sure that you're also optimizing the spend and making sure that you're getting the best total cost of ownership and the best return on investment for where your workloads are being placed.
Very cool. I'm digging these nuance, kind of the and. Okay, we've got our last two questions. So if you haven't been participating in the polls, get in it, get on it. We want to hear from you. Is your company primarily migrating workloads to public cloud or service providers? So primarily public, primarily to public, primarily from public. Are you looking at SaaS? Are you thinking bare metal as a service, or absolutely no migrations on the radar whatsoever? Not even thinking about it. And so where are you at? Let us know. Dave, Jack, we might get into this a little bit later, but what do you predict we're going to see?
I predict we're still going to see a high level of migrations into public cloud, but it's interesting when you start talking about the repatriation conversation, and Jack hit on this and sort of saying that when people are looking at now where to place things, sometimes the first choice that they made wasn't the right choice, and they're saying, okay, well, let's not compromise on that option, and let's look at maybe we put something in the public cloud that we later determine runs better on premises, or vice versa, things that we kept on premises for a long time that we finally realized, hey, maybe cloud has caught up enough to be able to do that. So I think we're going to see a lot of variety in this one too.
Yeah, and I kind of double down on that. I think the variety in this one is clearly what I'm going to expect we'll see, because as companies work towards placing those workloads where they should be processed, it isn't a constant flux. There is this kind of fluidity of data environment, and we see that and are really at Pure addressing kind of how that fluidity can be managed across this. So I think that the variety of answers here, I think, is going to be really interesting to see how that plays in terms of kind of the results ultimately that we see out of this.
And for everyone out there, stay tuned, because we will show you the results to this in just a moment here. And our last question for all of you before we jump in: if you are primarily migrating to public cloud, what percentage of that task have you completed? Now, this might be a scary one. If anyone out there is feeling attacked or scared by this, don't worry. We're going to give you some options and solutions. But so either, no, we're not doing this at all, we're just getting started, we're like a quarter of the way, we're halfway there, we're almost done, or we are 100% 100% in the cloud, in which case, high fives. But if you're still at the start of this process, don't worry about it. What do you guys think? Dave, Jack, anything to add here?
Yeah, well, I think the answer to this one is really going to highlight the whole concept of cloud migration, being a journey. And for a lot of
Yeah.
companies, it's a multi-year process. And it usually starts with just even understanding or deciding, the types of things that you want to put in the cloud versus not putting in the cloud, the priority level of those types of activities. And the fact that, even today in 2023, not everybody has embraced cloud yet. So I think sometimes as a cloud guy, I find that hard to believe because we love cloud so much, but there's a lot of good reasons why people are maintaining sort of existing systems at the same time.
Yeah.
Yeah. Look, from my side, what I'd say is that, the concept of a public hyperscaler cloud has been around for, essentially 20 years now. The conversations that I have with technology leaders and the customers I work with, very few have made it all the way there. A lot of them are really dealing with the challenges of that we'll get into, like how they refactor their applications. Can you lift and shift? Can you use the same staffing? And so I think when we look across the answers that I'm expecting we'll get from this is, I think we'll see very few at the very top end of this. Those that are in the 50 to 70% range, 75% range, I think those are the ones that I'm always interested to have the most open conversations with, because they're the ones that are they're stuck there. They don't know which direction to go because they do have to manage some of their past or legacy technology challenges.
Yeah, I am excited to get into that. And I think we'll get there when we get to some of these results slides. So stay tuned for all of you out there, because we are going to dig into a little bit more of what you said. But we're going to take just a quick kind of step back, because as diving in to where all of you are at, I want to do a little bit of a level set on the cloud itself. And so, Dave, I'm wondering if you can kind of start us out and tell us a little bit about what IDC is seeing in terms of how companies are actually defining the cloud. And then I'd really love to get into what is driving the expansions, and we were just talking about that shift. What's driving the expansions and shifts in these cloud trends?
Yeah, certainly. So let's get into the meat of the conversation.
Yeah.
Jack made that comment about the fact that cloud has been around in some form or fashion for about 20 years, and of course it really started with the hyperscaler public clouds, and so it's not unusual that when people think about cloud, they just think about public cloud. And to be fair, it was those providers that really introduced a lot of the cloud concepts that we are so familiar with today. Things like on-demand provisioning and scaling up and down as needed, and paying on that consumption model, just paying for what you use. And so that fueled a lot of that first big wave of cloud adoption, because it created just a new way for companies to think about how they purchase and manage infrastructure, and that whole idea of saying, hey, get away from dealing with the hardware and all the maintenance on that and really focus on the higher value activities. So that was a great, sort of first chapter in the public cloud story. What happened over time, though, is that customers started to realize that while public cloud is great, there are certain situations and certain workloads where it's actually not optimal. And you hear this in a few different categories. Sometimes it's performance related. And you'll hear this around sort of the latency conversation of that round trip it takes from wherever you are as a user to the cloud and back can be prohibitive for certain real-time applications. You see this also around cost. I think everybody in today's macroeconomic climate is thinking about budgets and things. And as companies started to really adopt cloud over time, they realized that it's not always more cost effective than deploying things other ways. And so, cost became kind of an issue. Security and compliance is always one of those concerns around whether it's things like digital sovereignty, regulations, or other issues where customers are just, concerned about whether or not they want that data to leave their facility. And then more recently, it's sad to say, but not all clouds have had a perfect track record when it's come to uptime. And so this idea of how do I maintain the operations of my business, whether the cloud is not working correctly for some reason or the network between me and the cloud. All right, so these are all sort of reasons that people said, hey, I like cloud, but I don't know that I always like public cloud as the option. And it's really made people think a little bit differently about it. And you see this in the industry in a lot of ways. In fact, one of the things I've been saying now for the last year or so is, don't think of cloud like as a location, but think of it more as an operating model. And you can take that operating model and deploy it in a lot of different cases or places. And that's exactly what we're seeing today. So whether it's, cloud concepts coming directly into the customer data center, on premises, or you're seeing more and more of, cloud concepts inside of co-location facilities. You see them even embedded in telco. And so this is creating, I think, a lot of great opportunity for customers to not think about this whole idea of like this duality of it's either in the cloud or it's on-prem. There's actually a variety of different deployment options. And as part of that, I think customers are also trying to decide like what level of control do they really want in some of these environments. And that's where the bare metal conversation comes in, because unlike a virtualized environment that you don't necessarily have direct access to the hardware and you're sharing things and all those sorts of potential challenges, the bare metal situation puts the customer more in control of the software stack, more control over the security environment. And so we're seeing, just from the activity that we see both in, market results as well as customer demand, that bare metal is becoming yet another one of these very unique options. So it's a combination of different deployment locations, but then even different like cloud technology types. So we'll start there as kind of the things about how I've seen cloud change over the last several years.
I really like that transition from a location, which is sort of inherently static in the way we think about it, and changing that a little bit more to an infrastructure, which has a sort of breathing room and growth opportunities, and can be a little bit more flexible in how we interpret that. And I think even just changing that mindset shift and how we approach it can be really powerful. So I'm excited to kind of start there. And I think that actually feeds us really nicely, Jack, into where I wanted to go next with you, because when we're talking about cloud deployment, we have these 6 states of cloud deployment. And I'm wondering if you could maybe give the audience a little bit of insight into what those 6 states are and what is really important about each one of those states.
Yeah, thanks, Jess. I think, first of all, Pure's taken a really pragmatic and practical approach to how we're defining where customers are deploying and what deployment models they are. And note that this isn't stages, this is states. Because in many cases, customers are really in flux between these different states. So, whether you're in your own on-premises data center that you actually own and manage and have to keep the facility up and running and keep the power and the interconnection going, or you've outsourced the data center to a state 2 where you're now in a co-location environment working with, even some of the largest partners where Pure's working with, like with Equinix. They've got a large global presence for co-location, and it gets you out of the data center ownership, but you're still having to actually man and staff the actual facility, the hardware that's in there. We're seeing the emerging trends around this bare metal as a service, and we're going to get deeper into that as we go through this. But as we talked earlier about that hybrid multi-cloud, the interconnections matter, how you're actually interconnecting these environments. And so that's that state 4, where it really is a matter of connecting between 1, 2, or 3 state into what most people talk about, the cloud, that hyperscaler or public cloud environment. And of course, you've got that far edge of the cloud where the Internet of Things was a big term a few years back, but really where the data is being driven now kind of in a reverse content delivery model, where it's moving from really that state 6 where it's at the edge. It's now being produced there, and it needs to be moved back into these different states to be able to turn that into value for companies. So, companies deploy this in most cases. They're in multiple states at any time, and it's not a linear progression. And some are moving backwards across that, and some are moving forward, but it's not linear. And I'd say, we are there to meet the customer's needs in terms of where their data workloads are. Data has gravity. It is important to recognize that moving large data sets from one state to another involves a lot of challenge of migration. And so Pure's there to really help kind of make that easier. But we want to talk to our customers in the terms that they're used to and that they would really understand. What state are you in? And this is a good way for us to really kind of define how those states are put out there.
That's a great reminder, that sort of switch. I think so often we want things to be this nice linear progression and then we go straight through it. So I really appreciate that sort of reminder to anyone that might be feeling, that it's messy or that they failed because maybe they're in multiple states at once or they're going back and forth. And I think that is an important place to kind of start. So we've started with a little bit from both of you. You're giving us these sorts of here's maybe how we've thought about things in these more static points of view. And what you're really encouraging us to do is to be a little more flexible with some of our more rigid ideas and accept that maybe things are a little more fluid than we had thought. And so I think where you've taken us, Jack and Dave, thank you very much, is a good understanding of the cloud, a good understanding of what's important in these states of deployment. And now what I'd really like to do is get into the customers. Because obviously I think that's a big and important piece of where we're going in this conversation. So Dave, I'm wondering if maybe you could start us out thinking about what the customer's goals are. What is important, what matters to customers that you're seeing right now?
Yeah, so certainly what we're seeing is that CIOs are under more pressure than ever to deliver new capabilities quickly. And that's what the cloud is perfect for. You see that cloud conversation really talked about in more of this like innovation driver, like how can we get things done faster? But as I mentioned before, there's been an acknowledgement that that public cloud doesn't necessarily handle all the situations. And so really what you see CIOs asking for is kind of like a no compromise approach to building infrastructure. And so it's taking that cloud value proposition and then really trying to strike a balance between a couple of key areas. So we talked a little bit about the performance and cost and privacy as being things that they might want to optimize, and that drives decisions about where you place certain workloads. I mentioned a little bit about the control and the access that customers have in terms of maintaining not just where their equipment is and where that data center is, but who really has access. And then there's a staffing element of this too. I mean, companies are trying to figure out, when you ask them often about moving to cloud, that having the right skill sets can be challenging for a lot of companies to hire the right people and find them in a very competitive environment. And so, all of these are playing a role. And when I was thinking about that last answer that Jack gave around the states, it reminds me of, the old saying, like, follow the money. But I think the updated version of that is now follow the data, because you can really tell based on the type of data that you have, the flows between different applications and different states really drives a lot of these decisions. The other thing that we see a lot of interest in, and I'm surprised we made it this far in today's conversation without mentioning AI, but here we are. It's real, right? I mean, we're seeing a lot of interest from companies of all sizes, of all types, now really being, really sort of creative around the ideas of where AI might fit into their business, whether it's that AI for like optimization and productivity increases, or whether it's to launch like new products and services that are made let's say, better or more valuable through the addition of AI. And so, the question becomes, though, is how does a company that we already said skills are an issue in all of this. And this is where, you see companies looking to, cloud technologies as just an easy way of getting into new technology faster. The problem is back to the where do you put it? The other thing that comes along with infrastructure required for AI is it's typically very expensive, initial capital outlay. And it has much higher requirements in the data center for power and cooling that some companies might not be prepared for. And there's so many other things that you have to think about that sort of making people sort of, I guess, test back to the original question we were asking about, like in your data center or in somebody else's data center. These are all sort of additional sort of trends that are driving people to say, I'm looking for something that's not public cloud, but it can't be in my data center. What's that middle ground? And that's really this question of, going, looking at that sort of as a service business model, where you don't own the equipment, right? You're paying for the use of that, which also means it comes along with a lot of managed services that can be very helpful for companies. So it's this, push and pull between centralized and distributed. How do you get to scale in these environments while still maintaining security? Again, this idea that, if you're looking for some of these high performant infrastructure types, bare metal has certain advantages over virtualization, and we're seeing it in a bunch of different sectors, right? We see it in like HPC, so big like modeling and simulation. We see it in like media and entertainment and gaming that has some high performance things. We're also seeing it in situations where maybe you're not even talking about a cloud native application, but you're talking about applications that have licensing tied to certain hardware requirements, or you want more control over that software stack. Like all of these things are sort of changing that sort of the buyer needs, I guess, when it comes to what they're looking for in cloud and how they're, thinking about, where to place their next bets or where to make their next set of investments. Jack, how does that kind of play into what you're seeing?
I think you're spot on in terms of what we see, and I kind of summarize it in kind of core areas. Companies are looking, the whole promise of the cloud, as the big C, cloud, is about speeding up business flexibility and agility. It's about matching the spending to results. It's about increasing the time to value of the infrastructure that you're putting under things, and understanding the realities of the skills gaps or the application refactoring costs. This is what they're looking for solutions in, and it's not as simple as just, I'm going to put it all in somebody else's data center and it's just going to run because I don't have to worry about it. Like you talked about a lot of the realities of how those workloads need to interact with the data and how the individuals have these skills gaps. An infrastructure manager is not an SRE. A DevOps operator is not an application core code developer that's thinking about 3-tier architectures. And so, that ability to kind of react to the business and provide value from your IT infrastructure is really what the promise we're seeing that things like bare metal and kind of covering that middle ground is really solving, because there hasn't until recently been this general understanding that it's more than just a public cloud or on-prem. There's those states in between.
Well, I think you've given us a lot of the needs that we're seeing, and that flexibility and agility, the scalability, all the ilities, and of course, cost always is an issue, and staff. I mean, that's constant, and not just the need for it, but then the training and making sure that you have the right skill sets within your team. So lots of needs. And I'd love to dig in and kind of keep going with this conversation and talk about some real world experiences. So I'm wondering, Dave, if I can ask you to maybe give us a few of the actual pain points that you're seeing, customer pain points, and the real experiences that they're having with cloud implementations.
I wish I could say everybody that has gone to cloud has had a perfect experience, but the reality is that it hasn't been true. And so, I look at it sort of in a pragmatic kind of balanced approach where we've all seen the great cloud success stories. But a lot of times I feel like when people say they've had a bad experience with cloud, sometimes it really gets down to these two words that sound very similar, but they're very different. And what I mean by that is migration versus modernization. And so, and the way I think about it is when you're migrating an application, you might be modernizing it. But for a lot of companies, they don't necessarily have, it may not even make financial sense to modernize an application, but they still would like to, take advantage of the sort of the cloud operating model. So you see people sort of moving, sort of is the lift and shift concept that we've talked about for so long, just migrating an application and then thinking about modernization later. And when I say modernization, it's usually meaning something in terms of taking like a big monolithic application and breaking it down into microservices and using containers and a lot of API driven automation, all of those sort of cloud native concepts that we've been talking about for years. But again, when you hear oftentimes about how to be optimized for public cloud, it does typically the answer back from the public cloud providers are you need to do a lot of this modernization effort, and again that typically involves heavy investments. That doesn't always make financial sense based on the ROI. And so, this is driving, customers to think about, well, so how can I, get sort of the best of both worlds? The other thing that we mentioned about cloud and the data sovereignty conversation, we see this a lot in Europe, but it's not just there. We're seeing it, whether it's governmental regulations or industry specific regulations, or to be honest, more and more companies that are just saying like whether or not we're compelled to build things in a very sort of protected way, we're going to do it because we think it's best for our customers. And that requires more than just data residency. It's, again, those controls over those systems. The other thing that really comes up a lot when it comes to bad cloud experiences, and I mentioned it earlier, was, and Jess just did too, around the costs of things, especially an area that people weren't paying so much attention to in the early days of cloud, which are all the data transfer fees, or more specifically, data egress fees, right? So everyone, I think, has sort of figured out now that it's usually no cost to put your data in the cloud, but when you need to take it out, there are fees associated with that, and they can be significant. And when you think about, the hybrid scenario where you are transferring data back and forth between on-prem and cloud, or you think about like multi-cloud, that's exacerbating these problems. And so it gets back to then, so what do you do then as an IT leader? Like, how do you potentially alleviate your issues of, like, I don't want to manage the data center and the facility and keep upgrading and paying for all that, but I know that, public cloud potentially has limitations that won't work correctly for my organization or my workloads. And this is what brought me to a term that, Jack and I have been talking about for a little while, which is this idea of this forgotten middle, right? This idea that when people talk about like cloud and edge, they say it like they're singular things. And more often, like, edge gets often associated with, on-prem facilities, where really there's that middle ground. And co-location has become, just a more and more interesting place, for those two worlds to come together. And Equinix, did a great job of kind of moving up the value stack in terms of, it wasn't just rent a cage in an Equinix data center. That introduction of Equinix Metal now created that foundation for an infrastructure as a service feel, but in a bare metal way that allows, other companies like Pure Storage to come in and augment that with the things that they do really well. And so it kind of becomes this kind of idea where you can, it's that middle ground between that sort of on-prem and public cloud. And people are looking at it really as a way of reducing risk and the types of things that they're doing. So I'll pass it over to Jack, maybe expand a little bit more on that, sort of the bare metal, not just the bare metal conversation, but more specifically like that bare metal being delivered as a service.
Yeah, well, I think, listen, as we jump into what is bare metal as a service, I think it's a term that some are just starting to learn what it means, and so what I'd say, kind of at the top of it, is it covers that forgotten middle. It covers that area between I own or have to staff a data center, or I've completely moved all my workloads to somebody else's cloud. That middle ground solves a lot of those problems because it really delivers physical, dedicated single tenancy of everything from the servers, the storage, and the network. So it's just like you have your own data center, but you don't have to staff it. You don't have to manage it. You actually don't have to own the infrastructure itself. You can just take it and consume it as you need to move workloads or burst or allow for your workloads to be able to be in that kind of governance or security or regulatory area where you know exactly what physical infrastructure they're on. So you have that physical asset that you can track, but you're not at the mercy of noisy neighbors. You also retain that root level administrative control. So back to the control statements, David, that you've made around it is your environment. When you move to a hyperscaler environment, you're cut off from a lot of the administrative controls of what's under the hood, of what's the physical infrastructure. And so it really delivers that full level of control, but in the same manner of a deployment model where you can go and launch it from APIs. You can launch it from, with the integration we have with Equinix and the Equinix Metal platform, where you can deploy servers on demand. You can deploy storage, and that allows you to run that virtual but physical data center and still maintain all the same controls. So your legacy applications will run there. Your modernization efforts can run there. Containerization can sit on top of that. And you still have that ability to leverage the licensing models that you've invested in or your applications require. And so you're not having to do that modernization in place, or you're not having to do that modernization just to get there. You can bring your licenses over, and it allows you to control all the way down to the physical CPU sockets, and you get these dedicated storage appliances. So it really provides that coverage for that forgotten middle.
Yeah, the other thing I would add is anybody that has had experience in the past, because I did, and when I first heard of this concept, I was thinking, well, isn't this just kind of like what some of these providers had done with private cloud? And what I mean by that is, you would get sort of bare metal potential servers, but the process was anything but automated, right? You'd go and you'd call up and you'd order your stuff, and maybe it would show up in a week, or maybe if you're lucky, it would show up in a couple of days or whatever. The more modern way of doing bare metal as a service is completely automated in terms of like provisioning out of a pool of resources, just like you would do in public cloud, and being able to purchase them in much smaller increments as opposed to like big yearly commitments and things like that. It really has created this sort of new feel of that cloud experience, but with that sort of real control and the ability to to do it quickly on servers that you ultimately have the ability to shape the way you want them.
Okay, this has been a great introduction to sort of the heart of what we're getting at and some solutions that we want to get out to the team. And I want to keep going in this trend of solving these problems for our audience. But I think this might be a great place to sort of stop and take a look at some of the results that we got early on. And then we can sort of use that to inform the next stages of our conversation. So if you guys are all ready for that, I feel like I should drum roll for this. So this is our very first question. So this was, do you have plans to move out of your on-prem or co-location data centers? And your answers split right down the middle, perfectly split. What do you think, guys?
It's as if Jack predicted it. He was like, I think this is going to come in about 50-50. And I didn't think that it would actually be on the nose 50-50.
Oh God!
Yeah, it is impressive that we can see, but it's indicative of kind of where customers are. Like you go back to I think we got the results on where they are in their journey. I think we can take a look at what those are going to look like too.
I love this. This is great. It's almost as if we have two incredible experts who are well versed in all the data. All your predictions are coming true. So moving to the hyperscaler, we are a little bit more on the no side.
Like to me, I mean, I'll kind of comment on this. This isn't surprising to me, but what's probably surprising to maybe some is that people are moving workloads. I mean, that's over 25%, closer to 30% of those customers that are saying like, I've gone there and it's not meeting all my needs. So while the trend kind of swinging that pendulum back from where workload placement's going, this is a trend that I'm seeing kind of increasing in every year. More and more customers realizing it's not meeting all the answers.
All right.
Yeah, the other thing I would add to that is sometimes it's not always about necessarily, moving workloads around. Once you put something in a place, I mean, it's not trivial to move it. But what I'm really seeing the uptick on is when people have new things. They're not just following the status quo. They're exploring new options for how to maybe run those better than they had in the past.
Okay, I moved along to our migrating workloads, and basically, are people considering doing this to or from? And the smallest percentage, I'm actually seeing this as an awesome opportunity for you guys to convince everyone, because our smallest percentage is in our bare metal as a service, and you're going to explain why this should be a different number. But is this kind of what you expected to see?
From my point of view, this is spot on, because I'd say, over 2/3 of the audience that we're speaking to today is moving workloads around. It means they haven't found the right answer. Yeah. I think that, I also would say that the opportunity here on the bare metal is really that, as Dave referred to it, that forgotten middle. Let's not forget about it. There is this capability to have a full cloud-like experience, but still maintain that full physical infrastructure capabilities.
100%. Yes. So basically just one big plug for what Dave was just talking about. And our last poll result question here is, if you're primarily migrating to public cloud, what's the percentage? So we're seeing kind of a pretty even split around the middle, and the only outliers being either we're not going to or we're already in. So everyone else seems to be kind of on the journey.
Yeah, I'm not surprised to only see one person get all the way to the cloud. And by the way, congratulations, because I'm sure that was not an easy process. And I have talked to other customers that have completely shuttered their data centers. But to me, I feel like what we're continuing to see, though, is more of where everybody else is at, where either they're still part of the journey, or even as they're going through that journey, they're reevaluating where to place some of these resources.
All right. Well, gold star to our 100%ers, and hey, we're with you to everyone else. And we've got some good thoughts for you to help you with your journey. So I think now we have a good idea of where the audience is at in the moment. We've talked about some of the challenges and the goals. And so, as I said, I am ready and pumped to get into the good stuff, which are the solutions, the solving of the problem. So, Dave, talk to us about the latest trends in how customers are actually solving some of these needs that we've been talking about.
Yeah, I alluded to this earlier a bit around this debate that customers are having around the centralized versus the distributed sort of models. And edge computing certainly pushed things a little bit more into that distributed concept. The multi-cloud reality that most companies find themselves in are also putting them. So I would say, number one, we're just seeing a much more distributed approach. And when I say that, distributed both in terms of like locations, like the spectrum that I mentioned earlier, and then also distributed in terms of not placing all their eggs in one basket. We're seeing more and more customers really take this like best of breed kind of idea to things. And so really matching up different workloads and workload needs with different providers and the solutions. We'll probably continue to hammer home this idea around this, the forgotten middle and how it's almost like the Goldilocks solution, right? It's not too hot, it's not too cold. It fits right into it for a lot of things. It's interesting to see that there was only one person that sort of identified with bare metal being an aspect of what they're looking at, but because what I'm seeing and the things that I'm talking to customers about is that they're seeing it as an alternative to some of the existing solutions that are out there. And so hopefully through the course of today, as you're learning a little more, maybe some of those folks that are was not planning to migrate say, hey, well, maybe I wasn't planning to migrate until I realized that there's some other options, that are out there. The other thing that I think is really interesting in cloud is we've seen such an uptick in partnerships in sort of the ecosystem around traditional IT vendors, or whether they're like on the OEM side or the ISV side, working with other companies, whether it's public cloud or companies like Equinix, to really bridge those worlds together. I mean, I think that's actually a key element, this idea of bridging things that you already have and understand and places where you're going. And again, the fact that from a locational point of view, Equinix has such a great sort of footprint of data centers that are much more granular in nature. You can get them a lot closer to your users than maybe the big hyperscale east-west kind of scenarios. And then, when I look at like, where people are sort of building out these, that core compute infrastructure that something like Equinix Metal provides is a perfect solution for certain things. But then, there's always some additional storage that's required too in a lot of these solutions, especially when you get into high performance and things like that. And so pure storage working along with Equinix Metal in a sort of joint partnership way, just really opening up new possibilities.
Yes, Dave, perfect transition, exactly where I wanted to go next. Jack, I want to put you in the spotlight because I want to talk about Pure Storage. I want to get into how Pure is addressing these trends and helping customers solve that forgotten middle challenge that we've been talking about today. What do you got for us?
Well, so let's start off by saying Pure has a long history of really innovating in the data center and really kind of taking over that world and really gaining all the market. You can look at the IDC market share data as Pure has really gained the control of the data center by the innovative technologies that we have. But we also extend our core technology, the Purity operating system that takes advantage of the all-flash infrastructures we have on premises, and we extend that to the public cloud by allowing the same level of data reduction technologies, enterprise feature sets, all of the capabilities that we can deploy in a traditional on-premises data center. We can actually extend that to the public cloud, and so that allows us to really have that same consistent way of allowing your data to be managed in both locations. But what we're doing recently is this partnership with Equinix, this ability to deliver bare metal as a service in that hosted data center to seamlessly extend your data environments across any venue, covering that gap in the middle. And so that really is, we're providing that bridge to the cloud for your data. And as Dave talked about, that the challenges of moving data, the challenges of data gravity, we've embedded this technology with the Equinix Metal platform. It provides that full three-tier architecture, that ability to seamlessly migrate, and then also leverage things like Pure's Portworx technology to modernize in place, to modernize your workloads on your own terms. Together, we actually are now able to instantly deliver in 5 of the core global markets with Equinix. we can deliver instant availability of net new storage arrays for customers to consume. It fully integrates with Pure's Evergreen One storage as a service catalog. And so you can get varying levels of SLA and performance characteristics of the different type of workloads. And so it really provides that full flexibility. There's a lot of innovations and capabilities that support that ecosystem of technology that we're putting on top of that. So bring your own licenses, as Pure is also developing solutions to run across these platforms and to run on these platforms. And so it really is a unique way for customers to solve that problem. And we're not just talking, we're not talking small scale customers that need to deploy a couple of servers. We can deploy this at the scale of thousands. We can actually do multi-petabyte scale deployments. And so we're solving some problems for some of the world's largest enterprise and Fortune 500 companies, all the way down to companies that are in their own data center today and just needing to really realize they don't want to be in the data center and infrastructure business, and so they can actually move that into that environment and allow for your workloads to meet your business needs, and really, as I like to say, allow the cloud to fit your business versus the other way around.
Jack, that's so cool. And I think you're actually teasing right into where I'd like to take the conversation next, because so often the folks in our audience are making, a pitch or an argument to the rest of their team or to decision makers. They have to be able to bring, or even just for their own evaluative purposes, they need that ROI. They need to understand those metrics. So scalability is just a huge one. That's really important. But Dave, I'm wondering if you could kind of expand that list for us a little bit and give us the benefits and the business outcomes that the folks in the audience should be aware of.
Yeah, you mentioned scalability, but the other word I would emphasize is flexibility. And I think it's really a great time to be rethinking how you might be architecting some of your infrastructure and the data and applications that ride on top of it, because as we've been discussing this whole hour, there's more choice than ever. And I always feel like that creates a good environment for customers to really think about that blurred line between what you might put in a public cloud data center versus a co-location data center versus your own, or even out in edge locations. I see companies really now starting to really reap the benefits of when you do like typical ROI conversations with customers, there's sometimes a technology cost benefit, like, hey, I went to a different solution and it saved me some hard dollars. But when we do our ROI calculations, more often than not, we're seeing the value in other sort of adjacent areas, like increased efficiency, increased productivity, less downtime, more time to work on things that are higher value sort of aspects. And so I'm excited to see bare metal kind of emerging as yet another deployment model within cloud, and seeing how it's having a positive impact on those areas I mentioned. So the cost, the productivity, that improved control of the environment, and ultimately, back to one of the things I said earlier, it's like everybody needs to get it done, and they need to get it done now. And so that's where I feel like the as a service and cloud model has really helped people shrink their timelines, but then it's also allowed them to overcome some of the other limitations like the skills gaps and things like that, by having more of a managed service that takes care of all of the underlying components, so you can focus on the things that are most valuable for your business.
Yeah, listen, Dave, I'm going to jump in on that, because I think, as what Pure solved to this is really kind of maintaining that ability to do that in a simplified way. The orchestration of all of this. So, it really covers a lot of things that most people don't think about are part of the cloud value proposition, which is that ability to have all of the procurement elements. Like, how do you get gear shipped from one location to another and then install it and get set up? Like, we speed up all of that in this model. And so this is just really kind of doubling down on Pure's kind of core ethos of providing simplicity and optimization, and then bringing that sustainability advantage as we're really kind of focused heavy on where our sustainability messaging is we're actually optimizing how the data is placed onto all flash arrays, where we're shrinking down the power consumption, shrinking down the energy consumption, all the ecosystem around how we deploy our platforms and our infrastructure. It's all tied together in the value of the service. And so it really is also meeting a lot of that. You talked about kind of the control element. We're seeing this across healthcare industry, financial services, We're seeing it in regulated industries. But gaining all that flexibility, as you talked about, all that agility of the cloud operating model, but still maintaining that level of control that's necessary in those key worlds of regulated industries.
Oh, yeah, that flexibility, agility with security and control, that's a tough balance and so important. And I think, guys, I hate to say this because I sort of got lost in our conversation and now realized here we are at the bottom of the hour and it's time to wrap soon. I know that we have a lot of questions that have come in that we just aren't going to have time to dig into. So I do want to remind everyone in the audience out there that we will make sure that all the questions get sent to the Pure Storage crew and get answers back from Pure Storage IDC. So you will hear back and get some answers back to your questions. So please do keep those coming in. And I do want to get into to both of you with a second, into it with both of you in a second. Those are all the words I was looking for in terms of what to do for getting started and next steps. But I'm wondering, just to kind of bring us home a little bit here, if I can ask each of you for sort of a final thought, or if you had one thing that you want everyone in the audience to walk away, either understanding about the Pure solution in particular, the partnership with you, or just bare metal as a service in general, what would sort of that one step or first step be? And Dave, I'll start with you, and then Jack, if you want to wrap us up.
Yeah, I mean, I guess I'll just wrap by saying, repeating what I had said earlier, which is there's a lot of benefits to the cloud as a service model. But again, it doesn't mean that cloud has to mean public cloud, right? There are so many different options now that are available, whether it's in your data center, in an Equinix data center, or a different type of service provider type. You don't need to compromise on it's either this or this. It's more of it's this and this kind of working together in conjunction to help you overcome your technology hurdles and achieve your business goals.
Yeah, and I'll add my kind of key takeaway that I want everyone to kind of really come away from today's session is understanding there is an option. There is an alternative. There is a way to solve that forgotten middle. There is a way to get to that 100% achievement of operating in a cloud-like manner. And we're doing it. We're doing it with a great partnership with what we're doing with Equinix. We're providing that ability to do this on a global basis. And so this ability to address this forgotten middle and realize there's real solutions that have major advantages. And so, Dave mentioned it, the Goldilocks solution. I think that's a great way to wrap. This is really an alternative that fits that not too hot, not too cold, but right down the middle.
Well, that's perfect. So, Jack, I'm going to end it with you. If somebody out there, and I think we've got probably a lot of fans in the audience now that are interested in that Goldilocks, or at least you've sparked enough of an interest. You've caught them. They're worried about that forgotten middle. They want to make sure that they're addressing that. So, for anyone out there that wants to learn a little bit more and get started on this conversation, what do you recommend as their first step?
Well, listen, we've got a couple resources up here that I think are really important. The IDC white paper that Dave and his team put together, talking about the value of what bare metal as a service is, how you can achieve new business outcomes with it. I think if you want a copy, we'd be happy to get it to you. Just send an email to BMaaS@purestorage.com, and we'll get you a copy. If you want to learn a little more, you want to schedule a call with an expert and understand more, we got a website up there, www.purestorage.com/baremetal. You can hit the QR code to just take you right there. This is an area where you can go learn more. Pure has an entire solutions page that really talks about kind of key application sets, how we're taking this to the HPC and EDA market, how we're solving new things in the genomics space, how we're modernizing your VMware environments, and how we're delivering things. All of that's available with these resources. And really, want to make sure people understand that alternative. So these are great resources to get started.
That's awesome. Dave, any last thoughts from you?
No, I think this was a great conversation. If nothing else, I'm just hoping that we opened up some people's eyes to some new alternatives that are out there, some new ways of doing things, and excited to see what everybody builds next.
I love that. That's the cool part about these conversations, right? Is it's that spark that then goes out into the world, and who knows what will come out of these conversations. So Dave, Jack, I want to thank you so much for taking the time to be here with us today to talk us through some really cool concepts. And I know that the audience has gotten a lot. I saw a couple high fives come in from the audience out there, so I know they've really enjoyed it as well. It's been just a ton of fun chatting with you both.
It's been a great time with you, Jess, too. Thank you.
Yeah, same here.
All right. Well, don't leave us yet, folks, because there's a few more things that I have for you before we let you out on about your days. First, I do want to remind you all to visit that handout section. Make sure you've got the additional resources. Make sure you've got that QR code scan. Make sure that you're getting those takeaways, because we covered so much information here today and there's so much to dig into. And as much as we want to believe that we're going to remember every little bit that we heard, it's hard to retain all of that, especially maybe this is a newer concept for you. So if you're looking for those reminders later, make sure you've got those access to those resources and ways to kind of follow up and jog that memory. Make sure that you're reaching out and asking questions and getting connected with the Pure Storage IDC team. Make sure that you've got the insight and info that you need. So another great way to do that is to get those last questions in, because again, we'll make sure all those questions get sent over to the team, so you will get answers back to them. So keep those questions rolling in. Make sure you've got those resources. That's your homework assignment. Now, here is my gift to you. It is time for a prize giveaway. Bum-ba-da-da. All right, so we have a $250 Amazon gift card going to someone who is here live and present with us at the webinar. And that special somebody is Jonathan Zinden of New Jersey. Jonathan Zinden of New Jersey, congratulations to you. And as always, we will follow up with your prize winning after we wrap up the webinar, as well as everyone who asked a question. You are entered to win that best question gift card. So keep those questions in. You still got another 30 seconds or so to get them in. And then you are entered to win that $50 Amazon best question gift card. All right. Well, with that, on behalf of the Actual Tech Media team, I want to once again thank IDC and Pure Storage for making this webinar possible, especially to our really wonderful speakers here with us today. Dave and Jack, you have given us so much to think about today, which really brings me around to all of you. As always, a high five and a very special thank you to all of you out there in the audience today for making this conversation possible. You know, these fireside chats, this style of conversation is so fun to participate in large part because it gives us, all of us here collectively, a chance to talk together. You know, we really like speaking with all of you out there. So through the polls, through the chat window, this is a way that we can all learn together. We can share some ideas, we can share some of those challenges, maybe some of those opportunities, and then eventually get to those solutions collectively. And that shared learning and that shared opportunity to come together is really the best part of these conversations. So I know that I have learned a ton out of the session today. I hope that you all have as well. I hope that you've had a really good time with all of us. I can't wait to see you all at a webinar again soon. And until then, I hope you have an absolutely beautiful end to your day.